الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The last time when we had the lesson, which was 2 weeks ago, we were looking at various rulings with regards to the Jummah Salah in terms of the conditions which needs to be found for Jummah Salah to be obligatory, for Jummah Salah to be valid. And we concluded the lesson by looking at various rulings with regards to the Jummah Adhan. Now we're going to begin this week's lesson by looking at another important condition or a prerequisite which needs to be found for the Jummah Salah to be done. And that is with regards to the khutbah. Now what I'm firstly going to do is just mention various rulings with regards to how the Imam or the Khatib should deliver the khutbah and the sermon. And we will then finish off by looking at a very hot issue or a hot topic in terms of can the khutbah be given in any other language besides the Arabic language. So can the actual khutbah be given in English, can it be given in Urdu, can it be given in Persian, and so on and so forth. Now, first of all, just a few rulings with regards to the khutbah. In the Hanafi fiqh, it is mentioned that the minimum requirement for a khutbah is to say one subhanallah. So technically speaking, if somebody was to stand up and say subhanallah and then sit down and then he gets up for the second khutbah and then he says subhanallah and then sits down again, then his khutbah will be done. Because the minimum requirement is just to say one subhanallah. And I mentioned this particular point in our last lesson, that sometimes at work when we do the Jummah, and I mentioned that it's not necessary that you have to be a great sheikh or a great imam to deliver or actually lead a Jummah prayer. Anybody could just say subhanallah once. So any person who knows how to recite the Quran decently and he knows how to pray the salah, then if he was to just deliver the khutbah and was to say subhanallah alhamdulillah, then his khutbah will be done. So that is the first ruling. The second ruling, this is with regards to the imams, that when you are delivering the khutbah, so khutbah here, remember, is the Arabic speech, not the talk or the speech which is given before in English or Urdu. We're talking about the actual Arabic speech. So the second ruling is that when the imam is delivering his Arabic khutbah or speech, then it is considered makruh and disliked for him to move his hand around. Why is mentioned the hadith that Rasulullah would use his index finger and he will tap his left forehand or left palm like this. So when the imam is delivering the khutbah, then if he wants, he can actually do like this with his right index finger and tap it on his left palm. But for him to actually move both of his hands around, like you normally do with a normal talk or a speech or a bayan, then you're not allowed to do that whilst the khutbah is going on. So that is the second ruling. The third ruling is, this is more for the followers or the listeners, that when you are listening to the imam delivering the speech, then what you should do is that you should have your face towards him, but bearing in mind that when you are having your face towards him, you don't go away from the Qibla. That you still maintain the posture of facing towards the Qibla, but have your body swerve towards the imam. So just say, for example, if the imam say is delivering the sermon or the khutbah here, to say there's a mimbar there, and somebody is sitting right there in the corner. So what he should do, the way he should listen to the imam delivering the khutbah is to have his body face or have his body swerve to the imam listening to the khutbah, but he's not allowed to be totally facing towards to the imam. Because when you are listening to the khutbah, you should still maintain your position in terms of facing towards the Qibla, in terms of your sitting position facing towards the Qibla. But what you can do is that you can have your body swerve to the imam and listening to the imam's speech and the khutbah in that particular way. So that is the third ruling. The fourth ruling, which is very important, is that after the imam delivers his khutbah and his sermon, one should start the iqamah for the salah straight away. if there is a gap, and the gap here means that if there is a gap which is not linked to the actual salah, then the scholars have said that one will have to start the khutbah all over again, and then he will have to do the iqamah. So just for example, somebody delivered the khutbah and the sermon, and then afterwards there was a gap in terms of, I don't know, somebody then started translating the khutbah, as some mosques do this, they actually translate the Arabic khutbah into English. So now there's a gap, and then they start the iqamah, and then they pray the salah. So that will be incorrect, because the sunnah is that as soon as the khutbah, the Arabic khutbah and speech is done, then straight away you should start the iqamah and then the jamaat and the congregation. However, just say for example, if there is a momentary gap in terms of, say for example, the imam getting the rows straightened, or the imam is just making an announcement that, all right, can everybody come to the main hall, or can everybody make sure that the rows are straightened? So because that particular announcement falls under the category of salah, which has got to do with the prayer, so therefore that would be allowed. But any other kind of interruption for other kind of worldly issues, or like some mosques do, they try to then translate the khutbah back into English or other language, and then there's like another mini speech going on before the jamaat or the congregation is starting, then in that situation that will be considered disliked, severely disliked, and one will have to redo the khutbah again. He will then have to do the iqamah and then start the salah. So that is another ruling to bear in mind. Another ruling, the fourth ruling here, is that it is preferable that the person who delivered the Arabic khutbah, he also leads the salah and he also leads the prayer as well. However, if somebody else wants to lead the prayer, then that would be allowed, that would be permissible, but the condition is that he must have heard the khutbah. So just say for example, if there is someone who the imam delivered the Arabic khutbah to, but that individual wasn't there for the entirety of the khutbah, then he would not be able to then thereafterwards lead the prayer. So the ruling basically is that the person who delivered the khutbah, he should actually thereafterwards go and lead the salah, lead the Jummah prayer. However, if somebody else wants to lead the Jummah salah or the khatib, then for some reason he can't do the recitation, or there's something wrong with his throat, and he wants another person to lead the prayer, then he can designate that responsibility, but the condition is that the second person who he is telling to lead the Jummah prayer, he has to be such that he was actually present for the khutbah. If he wasn't present for the khutbah, just say he came right at the end, then in that situation, that second person would not be able to lead the Jummah salah. Now this takes me on to the final point with regards to the khutbah, and that is that the khutbah, should it be done or delivered in the Arabic language, or can it be done in any other language besides Arabic? Now when we look through history, we can derive that it was the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the sunnah and the practice of the companions and their predecessors that they would deliver the khutbah in the Arabic language. Now some may argue and say, well, they were living in Arabia, so everybody understood Arabic in those days. But again, when we look through the history books, we see that when the companions and the predecessors, when they migrated to other countries, when they conquered other countries, so the other countries, they were non-Arab speakers, such as Persia when they conquered, and other places around the Arabian Peninsula and in North Africa, Spain and so on and so forth, they were non-Arab speakers. But even then, the khutbah was delivered in the Arabic language. So from this we can derive and understand that the actual sunnah and the actual requirement is that the khutbah is delivered in the Arabic language and not in any other language besides Arabic. Now some will then put forward an argument and will say, well, a khutbah is like a speech. They will say that khutbah is like a speech. So because no one understands Arabic, then why don't we just have the khutbah in English or in Urdu or in any other languages? Now when we look through the Quran and Hadith, we can derive that there is a special word which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has used for the khutbah. They didn't use the word like a speech or taqreer or these kind of words. but they actually used a special word. And the special word they used was the word zikr. As Allah says in the Holy Quran, فَاسْعَوْا إِلَىٰ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. That when the call of prayer is done, then فَاسْعَوْا إِلَىٰ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Hasten towards the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Mufassirin have said that the word zikr here means the khutbah. Even when we look at the hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, a very famous hadith, I probably mentioned this before as well, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about the virtues and the importance of coming early for the Jummah Salah. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that on the day of Friday, on the day of Jummah, the angels, they gather around the darwaza, around the doors of the masjid, and what happens is that whoever comes early, it is those that he has sacrificed a camel in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who then come afterwards, then it is those that he has sacrificed a cow in the path of Allah. Then that person who then comes afterwards, it is those that he has sacrificed a goat or a sheep, and that person who then comes afterwards, it is those that he has sacrificed a chicken, and then that person who comes right at the end, just before the Imam starts his Arabic khutbah, then it is those that he has donated an egg in the path of Allah. And then the hadith goes on to say that when the Imam then starts his khutbah, the angels then close their scribes and they then listen to the zikr. يَسْتَمِعُونَ الذِّكْرَ, which then means that anybody who comes afterwards, after the Imam starts his khutbah, then you will not be written in the scribes of the angels. So even though your obligation will be done, but you will not get the full reward and the full sawab. But the hadith quite clearly says that the angels thereafterwards listen to the Arabic khutbah. يَسْتَمِعُونَ الذِّكْرَ. So what we find from the Quran and hadith is that this khutbah, the Sharia has not called it a speech or a talk or a bayan, but instead they use the word zikr. Now let's have a look at the two words, zikr and bayan, or zikr or speech. Now just say for example, if somebody was delivering a speech. Now if somebody was to, just say for example, you invited someone to deliver a speech in your masjid. Now if he went up onto the minbar and he said, Subhanallah, and then he finished off his speech, would you say that that speaker or that imam has delivered a speech? No, because he just said Subhanallah. So what I'm trying to say is that the word zikr and a speech, there's a difference. Because when you deliver a speech, then you'll expect the imam or the speaker to talk for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 1 hour, so on and so forth. If the imam was to just say Subhanallah, you won't say, oh, mashallah, the imam has done a beautiful speech. He just said Subhanallah once. No, so what I'm trying to say is the difference, because when you say Subhanallah, that fulfills the criteria or the requirement of a zikr, but by saying Subhanallah, that doesn't fulfill the criteria of a speech or a bayan. So what I'm trying to say is that this word zikr, there's a difference between a khutbah and a zikr. So keeping this particular notion or this particular angle in mind, what we can derive is that a khutbah is not like a speech. It's not like your bayan, it's not like your talk and so on, but it's actually something more important than that. And as I mentioned, it's considered to be a prerequisite of the Jummah Salah, without which, according to certain scholars, your Jummah Salah will not be done. Now, there's obviously this particular issue, we could look at it in a bit more detail, but what I'm trying to say is that it is actually the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions that they would deliver an Arabic khutbah. Now the way to get around this particular issue, which people kind of discuss nowadays or say, oh well, you know, the Imam is always delivering his speech or his lectures in Urdu and we don't understand, hence we go to other mosques where they do the Arabic khutbah, they do the khutbah in English. Now the way to get around it is that the Imam Sahib should be requested in a humble way that, can you deliver an English speech or an English kind of lecture before, and then do the Arabic khutbah, and then you have the salah afterwards. And remember, the Arabic khutbah, as I've already said, it doesn't have to be a very, very long khutbah. Even by just keeping it short, 1 minute for khutbah, then the sunnah will be fulfilled. You know, the best way to get around it, especially for people who are actually leading Jummah, say in our universities where there is this very big problem, is that, okay, you deliver the bayan or the speech in English, so do a long bayan, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and then when the Arabic khutbah time comes, just do a short Arabic khutbah, like stand up, just do just read one Quranic verse, then sit down, stand up, then just read a hadith, and then sit down, and that's it, your Arabic khutbah will be done. So in that particular way, you're fulfilling the needs of the people in terms of you're delivering an English speech, and also at the same time by doing the Arabic khutbah, even though it's in a shorter way, you're also fulfilling the sunnah and the requirement. So in that way, both parties will be happy, and then obviously you won't lose our youngsters to other people or to other mosques where they deliver the khutbah in the English language. So that is the best way to get around this particular issue and this particular problem. One point regarding this, the ruling with regards to Jummah here, and again, a lot of people have raised this particular objection, and they've said that delivering a speech before the actual Arabic khutbah, some have considered it to be a bid'ah and an innovation. I'm not sure if you heard of this, but some people, they've actually stopped any kind of speeches or talks before the Arabic khutbah. So there's no speech, there's no bayan. So just say the Jummah Salah is at 1:45. So at 1:45 they will start the Arabic khutbah, and then they will leave this, pray the Salah, and then they will go. And if you say to them, well, why don't you do a lecture before? Or they will say it's a bid'ah. Now regarding that, there is a hadith, or well, not exactly a hadith, but there is a practice of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu, and always remember that the practices of the companions are also considered to be a sunnah as well. And as mentioned, the hadith of Ibn Majah and Abu Dawud, we as Muslims have been told to not only obey and follow the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but also of the practices of the Khulafa Rashidin, which also includes Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu. It's mentioned that during Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu's time, remember he's the Amir, and obviously in those days, everyone will come to the main masjid where the Amir will deliver the Arabic khutbah, and he will also lead the prayer as well. But it's mentioned that during his time, before Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab would deliver the Arabic khutbah, Sayyiduna Tamim ad-Dari would also deliver an Arabic speech or bayan, and thereafterwards, as soon as Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab would come, Tamim ad-Dari will then finish his speech, and then Umar bin Khattab would then deliver the Arabic khutbah. So what we can understand from this practice of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab and Tamim ad-Dari is that there was this practice of a speech or a bayan, and thereafterwards the Arabic khutbah and the Arabic sermon, thereafterwards the salah during the blessed companion's time. So any person or any imam who say, oh well, it's a bid'ah to deliver a speech in your native language before the Arabic khutbah, then these people are unfortunately incorrect, and it quite clearly mentions the practice of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab and Tamim ad-Dari. And remember, if it was a bid'ah, you always say to them that, or if you think it's a bid'ah, then I'm sure Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab would not be doing a bid'ah. Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab was very, very strict and harsh when it came to innovation. So if this was something wrong, if this was something impermissible, then Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab would not have done it himself. One final mas'ala here with regards to this issue. Just say, for example, if somebody was in a masjid and they delivered the khutbah in a language other than Arabic, just say in English. Now the question is that would that salah or the Jummah salah thereafter, would that be considered valid or not? Now when we look through the books of fiqh, we actually find that the Hanafi opinion here is somewhat very relaxed compared to the opinions of the other imams. The other imams, like Imam Malik rahimullah, Imam Shafi'i rahimullah, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimullah, they have quite clearly stated in their respective books of fiqh that if the khutbah was delivered in a language other than Arabic, then the subsequent salah which is prayed afterwards would not be valid. They quite clearly said your Jummah would not be done. And they've even gone on to the point and they've said that, well, you will have to do qada of your Zuhr prayer. You'll have to pray Zuhr afterwards. So the other imams are quite strict regarding this issue. Whereas according to Imam Abu Hanif rahimullah, the Hanafi opinion is that if the khutbah was done, say, in the English language, then that is makruh tahrimi, severely disliked, totally against the sunnah. However, the subsequent salah which you then pray in Jamaat, in congregation, then your salah and your Jummah will be valid. So what we can see here is that the Hanafi opinion is quite relaxed regarding this issue, but obviously my humble opinion regarding this issue will be like obviously try to pray in a masjid where they don't actually do the khutbah in a language other than Arabic. Because obviously even though the salah thereafterwards would be accepted, but you will not get the full reward and the full thawab of this salah. Why? Because the khutbah was done in a language other than Arabic, other than what is the sunnah, and the sunnah is to deliver the khutbah in the Arabic language. One final point before I finish this masla or ruling off is that the khutbah, I mentioned that it should be done in Arabic. Then there's difference of opinions whether Arabic, do we mean classical Arabic or do we mean slang Arabic? Because obviously there are certain, like for example, Syrians or say for example Egyptians, they also speak Arabic as well. But their Arabic is totally different from the classical Arabic. You know, people in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and UAE, they also speak Arabic as well. Well, even like when you go to Makkah, Medina, Munawwara, they also speak Arabic, but their Arabic is totally like slang. So now just say if somebody stood up and spoke or did the Arabic khutbah but in a slang Arabic way, so would the khutbah be done or not? So regarding that, the scholars have mentioned that when you deliver the Arabic khutbah, you should use the classical Arabic language. Okay, so classical Arabic, we mean, is basically the text from the Quran and Hadith spoken in a classical way. So you should use that particular language. However, if somebody did use, say, slang Arabic, then the sunnah of the khutbah will be done. So what I'm trying to say is that it's more awla and more preferable that you use the classical Arabic to deliver the khutbah. However, if somebody used slang, then the khutbah will be done and there will be no detestability. There may be detestability, but it will be, say, far less than, say, if somebody delivered the khutbah in English or in Urdu or in any other languages besides classical Arabic or slang Arabic. Now we're just going to, before we look at the text in a bit more detail, one final issue here. And the issue which we need to look at is with regards to the history regarding the mimbar. The mimbar plays an important part, especially on the day of Friday, on the day of Jummah, because it is a place, the pulpit, where the Imam stands, delivers either his speech before the khutbah, but he'll definitely use it for the khutbah when he gives afterwards. Now, mimbar is something which came later on in Islam. When Islam started, when Rasulullah ﷺ was the age of 40 in Makkah, and then even afterwards, when Rasulullah ﷺ migrated to Medina Munawwara, there wasn't a system of mimbar. It was in the 8th year of Hijri. So it was in the 8th year of Hijri when Rasulullah ﷺ had a mimbar, and this mimbar was made by a slave of the Ansar. So there was an Ansari person, he had a slave, and he made a mimbar for Rasulullah ﷺ. And the first mimbar which this slave made for Rasulullah ﷺ had 3 steps. And Rasulullah ﷺ, he would stand, so Rasulullah ﷺ would sit, on the 3rd step. So he would stand on the 2nd step and he would deliver his khutbah and his sermon. So whenever Rasulullah would deliver the khutbah, so he would sit on the 3rd step and he would be standing on the 2nd step, and then he would deliver the khutbah and the sermon. When Rasulullah ﷺ passed away and Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu became the first Khalif, due to or through humbleness, what he then did was that Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu would sit on the 2nd step and he would stand on the 1st step. So remember, Rasulullah would stand on the 2nd step and sit on the 3rd. Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu would sit on the 2nd and he would stand on the 1st. And then during Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab anhu's time, again doing tawazu and showing a bit of humility and humbleness, Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab anhu would sit on the 1st step and he would stand on the floor like on the ground, and then he would deliver the khutbah. Now, after Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab who passed away, Sayyidina Uthman who then became the next Khalif and the Amir. So because it was not possible to go down even more, so therefore Sayyidina Uthman who, following on the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would then sit on the third step, stand on the second, and he would deliver the khutbah and he would deliver the speech. So what we can derive from the practice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the two companions is that whichever step you sit on, the minbar, then that would be allowed. Obviously, if you can, try to sit on the third step, stand on the second step and deliver the khutbah and the sermon. But just say, for example, there are certain minbars where the steps are quite big and quite high. So in that situation, if you were to sit on the second step and stand on the first step, then acting upon the sunnah of Sayyidina Abu Bakr then that would also be allowed and permissible as well. Now we're just going to now look at the text which is in front of us. The first text which Imam Quduuri rahimahullah has mentioned, remember these masails have already been looked at a couple of weeks ago. لا تصح الجمعة إلا في مصر جامع أو في مصلى المصر, which means that Jummah is not correct except in the Jami' Masjid, إلا في مصر جامع. As I mentioned before, that in the olden days there would be other smaller masjids around in the area. However, on the day of Friday, what would happen is that the smaller masjid will be closed and everybody will go to the main masjid. So this particular text is telling us that Jummah should be conducted in the main masjid of the city, or fi musalla al-misr, or in the Eidgah of the city. So Eidgah, again, would be a place which was actually in the outskirts of the city where people would gather for the Eid Salah. So what this text is telling us is, just say, for example, if the masjid is small and not everybody can fit in the main masjid of the city, then everybody should then go out to the Eidgah, where obviously because it tends to be in an open field, plenty of space is there. So everybody should gather there and the Imam will deliver the khutbah and will also lead the prayer there as well. The next text goes on to say, وَلَا تَجُوزُ فِي الْقُرَىٰ, that it's not permissible to conduct the Jummah Salah in a village. So again, this masla and ruling has already been looked at before. And I mentioned that small villages you can't pray the Jummah Salah. However, big villages or towns you can pray the Jummah Salah. And the definition of a big village is basically a place where there are 4,000 people or more. So if there are 4,000 people living in that particular area or more, then that is considered to be a big village. If it's called the necessities there in terms of the shops and post offices and so on and so forth, then that is considered to be a big village, and to conduct or to pray Jummah Salah in that area would be correct and permissible. The next text then goes on to say that وَلَا تَجُوزُ إِقَامَتُهَا إِلَّا لِلسُّلْطَانِ أَوْ لِمَنْ أَمَرَهُ السُّلْطَانِ, which means, again, this rule is more for in an Islamic state where it says that the Jummah Salah should be conducted by the Amir or by the deputy of the Amir. So if the Amir al-Mu'mineen, if he should lead the Jummah Salah, but if he's not around, then whoever he has designated the responsibility to, then that individual should lead the Jummah Salah. And then the next few lines then go on to tell us regarding the prerequisites and the conditions which needs to be found for the Jummah Salah to be correct, such as al-waqtu fatusihhu fi waqti zuhri, that Jummah Salah will be performed during the Zuhr time. Wala tusihhu ba'dahu, and it cannot be performed after Zuhr. Remember, on the day of Friday, Jummah is a substitute for the Zuhr Salah. The other 6 days of the week we pray Zuhr, but on the Friday, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said to the Muslims that instead of the Zuhr prayer, you pray the Jummah prayer instead. And then he goes on to say, وَمِن شَرَائِفِهَا الْخُطْبَةِ, that another prerequisite for the Jummah Salah is the khutbah, is the Arabic sermon which we have just been looking at in detail, قَبْلَ الصَّلَاةِ, and the condition is that it has to be given before the Salah. And that is the main difference between the Jummah and the Eid, is that the Eid khutbah and the sermon is given after the Salah, whereas the Jummah khutbah is given before the Salah and the prayer. The text then goes on to say, يَخْطُبُ الْإِمَامُ خُطْبَتَيْنِ يَفْصِلُ بَيْنَهُمَا بِقَعْدَةٍ, that the Imam will deliver 2 khutbahs, so there will be 2 khutbahs, 2 speeches, and he will sit in between the 2 khutbahs and the two sermons. He will have to sit down. And I mentioned again a couple of weeks ago that the period where the Imam sits between the 2 khutbahs, then that is considered blessed in terms of if anyone was to make any du'as or any supplications during that particular time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept the du'as and the supplication. It then goes on to say, وَيَخْتُبُ قَائِمًا عَلَى الطَّهَارَةِ, which means that the Imam should deliver the khutbah in a standing position, ala tahara, and also in the state of purity. So if the Imam delivered the khutbah sitting down, the khutbah will not be done. Similarly, if he delivered the khutbah without wuzu, then again the khutbah will not be done. He then goes on to say, فَإِنِ اقْتَصَرَ عَلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى جَازَ, which means that if the Imam just, say for example, suffice in the khutbah by just mentioning Subhanallah once, Alhamdulillah once, the khutbah will be done. Again, we've looked at this particular ruling. And it then goes on to say, وَمِن شَرَائِطِهَا الْجَمَاعَةِ. Again, this was looked at a couple of weeks ago, that another condition or a prerequisite for the Jummah Salah to be correct is that there has to be congregation. There has to be a Jama'ah. And I mentioned that according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, there has to be 3 people besides the Imam. And according to Imam Yusuf rahimahullah, he says if there are 2 people besides the Imam, then the Jummah will be done. So if, say for example, if there is just one person and the Imam, then the Jummah Salah would not be done. However, if there are 2 people and also the Imam, then according to Imam Abu Yusuf rahimahullah, then the Jummah will be done. But according to Imam Hanif rahimahullah, he says that the Jummah will not be done unless you have 3 people besides the Imam. I think I did mention this point a couple of weeks ago that if you are in such a situation where, just say for example, only 2 people have turned up, then in that situation, acting upon Imam Abu Yusuf rahimullah's opinion, it will be permissible for you to conduct the Jummah Salah. Because when you look at it, just say if 2 people turned up and you're the Imam, so there's 3 people altogether, you can't say to the people, we can't do Jummah, let's go to the nearest masjid or let's go to another mosque, because the likelihood will be that by the time you go to the next masjid, they probably would finish the Jummah as well. So in that situation, it will be ideal that, okay, there's 2 people besides you, you just lead the Jummah and that would be done. That would be valid. However, if there is, just say, one person besides the Imam, then in that situation, you will not be permissible for you to conduct the Jummah in that particular area, but instead you will have to pray the Zuhr Salah instead. The next text then goes on to say that وَيَجْحَرُ الْإِمَامِ بِقِرَاءَتِهِ فِي الرَّكْعَتَيْنِ وَلَيْسَ فِيهِمَا قِرَاءَةٌ سُورَةٌ بِعَيْنِهَا, which means that the Imam for the Jummah Salah, the recitation will be done loudly. And it's quite important the author has mentioned this particular point because, as we know, Jummah takes place during Dhuhr time. Any praise which is done during the day, we tend to read it quietly and discreetly. So some may be thinking that similarly the Jummah Salah will also be done in a quiet tone as well. The author is saying that no, that the Imam will recite the Qira'ah and recitation loudly for the Jummah prayer, and then he goes on to say, وَلَيْسَ فِيهِمَا قِرَاءَةٌ سُورَةٌ بِعَيْنِهَا, which means that there isn't a specific Qira'ah or recitation to read for the 2 rakats of the Jummah Salah. Now there are sunnahs, there are ahadith which says that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would recite Sabbih isma rabbikal a'la in the first rakat, Halataka hadithul ghashiyah in the second rakat. There are also ahadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would recite Surah Jumu'ah in the first rakat and Surah Al-Munafiqun in the second rakat. But that is like sunnah. What the author is trying to say is that whichever surah you recite, whichever part from the Holy Quran which you recite, then the Jummah Salah will be done. It's not necessary that you have to recite a particular surah for the Jummah to be done. The next text then goes on to say, وَلَا تَجِبُ الْجُمُعَةُ عَلَى مُسَافِرٍ وَلَا إِمْرَأَةٍ وَلَا مَرِيدٍ وَلَا صَبِيٍّ وَلَا عَبْدٍ وَلَا أَعْمَى. Again, this was looked at a couple of weeks ago, that Jummah is not obligatory on a traveler. So if a musafir, Jummah is not obligatory upon him. Okay, now obviously if he's in the area, then he should pray the Jummah. However, generally speaking, if he's like, say, traveling during that period or during that time, then Jummah Salah is not obligatory on him. Just say, for example, if he's on the plane during the Jummah time, then it's not necessary that he has to, skip his flight and then go to the nearest masjid and pray his Jummah. That's not necessary. However, if he's, say, for example, in that area, because obviously a musafir is someone who doesn't decide to stay at a particular place for 15 days or more, as we looked at before. So just say, for example, he's in that particular area, then obviously he should then come for the Jummah Salah. But however, if he's traveling, if he's in transit, then Jummah isn't obligatory upon him. Similarly, Jummah isn't obligatory on women. Wala imra'atin. Wala maridin. Jummah isn't obligatory on a person who is unable to come for the Jummah Salah in terms of he's crippled, he's disabled, he's on a wheelchair. Jummah isn't obligatory on that individual. Similarly, wala sabiyyin. Jummah isn't obligatory on a child. Wala abdin wala a'ma. Jummah isn't obligatory on a slave. Wala a'ma, and it's also not obligatory on a blind person. However, it then goes on to say, and I mentioned this point a couple of weeks ago, فَإِنْ حَضَرُوا وَصَلُّوا مَعَ النَّاسِ أَجْزَأَهُمْ عَنْ فَرْضِ الْوَقْتِ, which means that even though Jummah wasn't obligatory on a traveler, it wasn't obligatory on a woman, however, if they did come to the masjid and prayed their Jummah Salah, then the Jummah Salah will be done, and there's no need for them to pray Zuhr instead. Because normally these people, like travelers, women, they will be praying the Zuhr Salah because Jummah isn't obligatory. However, if they did come to the masjid and did pray their Jummah Salah, because many masjids like Central Masjid and the masjids around Birmingham, they do have facilities for women to pray Jummah. So if the women did come and pray their Jummah, then the Jummah Salah will be done, and there's no need for them to do Qaza or repeat the Zuhr Salah afterwards. Okay, we just leave it there for this week. May Allah just be tawfiq to everyone. Consider wa akhir da'wan. Alhamdulillah.